Hi, this is Sarah McClellan with Pixels and Pills in New York City at the ePharma Summit. I'm with Mr. Bob Harrell from Shire Pharmaceuticals, who just spoke this morning, and your speech was fantastic. Everyone was very engaged and laughing a lot. Can we get a little bit of your background and what led you to be here today?
Sure. So I actually have been in the industry for about 20 years. I started at Merck, then I was at AstraZeneca. I've worked on the digital agency side. I did have a stint overseas outside of pharma in a startup e-business in Prague for a couple of years. And then I've been with Shire for about the last 6 years, where I started the digital marketing group at Shire.
So you spoke about the innovation within the industry and from the perspective of being inside the industry. Do you want to elaborate on any of your key points?
Sure. Well, one of the other things that I've done is I have an interest in technologies that go outside of, the classic social media and mobile. And I attended a program in California called Singularity University that was co-founded by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis. And what it does is it focuses on accelerating technologies, not just information technology, but also genomics, nanotech, and 3D printing, some interesting things like that. So the focus of my talk today was really about how all those technologies are accelerating and how they might affect our industry and affect healthcare and pharma. Now, I don't think we can really know what will happen in 10 years, but there are some things that I think are pretty predictable based on the trends. One, that there's going to be a tremendous amount of innovation, an explosion of innovation, not just from institutions, but also from individuals, kind of like the garage computing movement of the 70s. The second thing is really a personalization that will happen in medicine that goes much more beyond what we've seen today. So as we approach, gene sequencing, it took originally $3 billion and 13 years to sequence the first human genome. It's now under $10,000 in a month. So within 5 to 10 years, it might be down to about $100 in a day. So if you think about it being very similar, about the same cost and time as a cholesterol test, then we're certainly going to see an explosion of gene sequencing and genomics, which will enable all kinds of new treatments and therapies.
So you were talking a little bit about sort of the correlation between the 70s and, Steve Jobs in his garage making computers, and then, these years later turning into this huge industry that we know as Apple.
Heard of it?
But then, yeah, heard of it. But then you spoke about some students at Harvard sort of doing the same thing with a DIY bio. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the sort of pros and cons of this sort of innovation and underground stuff is going on?
Sure. So there's a guy named Jason Bobby out of Harvard, and he started a group called Do It Yourself Bio, which is basically people who tinker with biology in their basements and garages. And they now have chapters all over the U.S. And it's a really interesting movement because just like in the 70s when people were able to start tinkering with computers in their garages, like Jobs and Wozniak, because the components had become so inexpensive, in a similar way, working with biology is becoming much more accessible to people. So this whole idea of do-it-yourself bio is an interesting movement. I mean, it's interesting and scary at the same time, right? But that's one example. And there's also at MIT, there's a program called iGEM every summer, and they bring in high school students to work with DNA and synthetic biology, and it's crazy. I mean, high school students working with manipulating DNA and making rats of different colors and things like that. So it's a lot of interesting things going on in that space.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and fantastic speech this morning. It was really great.
I appreciate it.
This is Sarah McClellan with Pixels and Pills.